Detroit's primary results, listening to Trump supporters in Michigan, plans to stop Asian carp in the Great Lakes, and the art of disagreeing with respect. Stay right there. MiWeek starts right now.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made and Mayoral cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
Hi there and welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. A lot going on across the state. We're going to get you caught up, including results of the primary and a surprise in Detroit. Plus a new Great Lakes Now report on stopping Asian carp from getting into the Great Lakes. Also coming up for you, Nolan goes out this week and talks to President Trump's supporters. Has the media really listened to them? And the art of disagreeing with respect. Is it possible to make more people stop and think before reacting? That'll be a pretty interesting conversation, but we're going to start with the results of the Detroit primary this week. It comes down to Mayor Mike Duggan against Coleman Young II. That was not a surprise. But the bigger story, City Council President Pro Tem George Cushenberry got knocked out of the primary. So let's start there with our MiWeek contributors. Nolan Finley, he's the editorial page editor of the Detroit News, and Stephen Henderson, the editorial page editor of the Detroit Free Press. Hey guys, I know we talked that there were going to be a lot of surprises here in the primary vote this week, but I do want to start with George Cushenberry. He came in third, Nolan.
Yeah, I mean, that's really shocking for an incumbent. I didn't see much evidence that Cushenberry was campaigning, no, and I think, you know, you do have to run for the seat. He was up against some well-known names. It was McCaskill McAllister that beat him, and Virgil Smith that beat him, which
he's been in trouble with the law.
He certainly has high name recognition.
Yeah.
What did you think of that when that vote came in?
I mean, I was a little surprised. But then I started to think about that district. I mean, that district includes Palmer Woods, it includes Sherwood Forest, it includes University District, Bagley. I mean, these are areas of town that are really benefiting from the sort of rebirth that Detroit is undergoing, and it's spilling over into the places now that hadn't been seeing it. I think you're getting a more sophisticated kind of choice from voters there. They want somebody who's really going to represent them and keep pushing things forward. Maybe they felt like George wasn't the right person for that. Roy McAllister, I think, is a very sort of prototypical voter in that district. He's run a couple times and come up short. This time he pulled it off.
It's interesting. So now we're going to be looking at the mayor's race. And we've talked a lot about how it's going to be coming down to, you have Coleman Young, who is going to be talking a lot about neighborhoods and how the neighborhoods have suffered and that the Duggan administration has not done enough for them. Mayor Duggan is going to have to answer this to Detroit narrative that he doesn't particularly, I think, believe exists right now. Nolan, what do you think this is going to come down to?
Well, I think you hit it. I think it's all neighborhoods, and you know, I think the challenge for the mayor is to continue to talk about the progress they've made and the foundation they've put in place. I mean, it would have been unrealistic to think anyone who could have turned around 60 years of decline in 4 years, but you know, he's got to talk about the foundation and what he intends to do to build on it over the next 4 years. Coleman Young, you know, is right to keep the pressure up on the two Detroit narrative, but he's got to do more than attack. He's got to offer some vision and some ideas, and
I
so
think
far
it was
he hasn't.
Interesting that Mayor Duggan said, "I am not going to attack my opponent throughout this entire process."
Well,
do you believe that's possible?
You're up 40 points on somebody. You don't have to just mention their name. I mean, I wouldn't say his name for the next 3 months if I were the mayor. But I do think that the substantive point about the difference between what's happening in downtown and midtown, some neighborhoods and other places is important. And I think the mayor can come up with better explanations for why that happened and talk more specifically about, okay, well, what's the next 4 years look like? I mean, 4 years from now, how many neighborhoods will still be sort of untouched by these dramatic changes? He doesn't want to do that because it's slow and there's not a lot of money and it's really difficult. But that is the work, and I don't think he's done a bad job of it so far. I think he's done what he could do in 4 years. There are a lot of places that we wouldn't have expected to see moving forward that are experiencing some change, but there are a lot of places that are just left out.
So you say that he should not mention his opponent's name at all, but the two sides have agreed that there is going to be a mayoral debate here, Nolan. That should be pretty interesting.
It could be. I mean, it's certainly going to give Coleman Young probably his only chance to, get on a big stage and take some shots at the mayor. But I think the mayor, I wouldn't expect him to be sprinting hard in this campaign. I think he'll focus on governing. As Steve said, he's up 40 points. It'd be shocking if he lost that, barring some kind of scandal. I would expect him to keep a very comfortable pace here and not go out too far out on a limb on anything.
All right, well, we'll keep watching and see where that debate ends up. They could always come to MiWeek and we could debate it out right here with you guys. What do you think?
We have done it before.
We could do it again. All right, so last week Nolan came to me with a story idea that he was going to do with the Detroit News. He wanted to go out this week and talk to Trump voters in Michigan about their support for the president and their thoughts. The media, us included, were criticized after the election for not listening to Trump voters and why they supported them. So Nolan came to us last week and he's like, I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to go out next week. And so indeed you did. So
yeah, I had a column about it today. I mean, I just thought we talk a lot about the Trump base, but again, we're back to not talking with them. We make a lot of assumptions about them. I was surprised. I thought they would be more defensive. I thought they would be angrier. They were pretty buoyant. I went out to Walled Lake to a rally at a restaurant, 80 to 100 people. They think things are going just the way they wanted them to go. They support the president still 100%. Any troubles they blame, and I was surprised by this too, not on the Democrats, but on congressional Republicans and on the media. I mean, they've fully joined the president in his war on the media. They think that's where the root of the problem lies. But they were as I never heard Chuck Schumer's name mentioned, but Mitch McConnell was practically burned in effigy. So I think it's gonna be tough for establishment Republicans to hang on to this bag.
All right, well, let's go ahead and take a listen to what they had to say.
My name is Michonne Maddock, and I am one of the co-founders of the Michigan Trump Republicans. And the purpose of these events was really, in the beginning, we just wanted to find a place to gather Trump supporters together. Diane Schindelbeck and I worked very hard to elect Trump here in Michigan. After Trump was elected, we kind of thought we would be able to relax a little bit and enjoy the fact that we got him elected, but immediately we sensed that he was not only under attack, but that the voters who supported him were confused. They were looking for answers. We have been continuing to receive text messages, emails, phone calls, even today, all the time, trying to help combat the fake news that they feel like they're being fed.
My name's Polly Kingsley. I'm from Milford, Michigan. I think under the extraordinary and historical attacks and sabotage that have been happening to try to take this president and his presidency down, I think he's doing remarkable. I can't imagine anybody having this kind of pressure and still accomplishing what he's been accomplishing.
Roseanne Punkowski. I'm from West Bloomfield, and I am the president of Michigan Conservative Coalition. Well, I've never been happy with the Democrats, and it basically extends to the Republicans because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not upholding the Republican platform. They're not doing what we sent them there to do, which we clearly did when we gave them the House, then we gave them the Senate, and then we gave them the President, and they still have not heard the message, as incredible as that may be.
Hey, everyone. Wow. Can I first say David and Amy, so you guys are...
All right, my name is John Brewster. I'm here to support my president, Donald Trump. Watch a lot of the news outlets and all that, and they actually, they almost try to answer answer your questions for you. They try to tell you how you think. And I think it is a swamp, or a sewer as he called it. I think it's and that's on, I hate to say it, on the Republicans and the Democratic side. I know I'm supposed to be 100 rah 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 Republican, but I feel like he's not getting help from both sides, because he actually is trying to clean it up in there, and he speaks for, I feel like he speaks for us.
A really interesting look, and by the way, Nolan shot that video too, so I'm really impressed by that. But I'm going to start with you, Stephen, and I'm going to let you kind of weigh in on what you heard, and was it what you expected to hear?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the people who voted for Donald Trump, many of them, and the people who are left supporting him, and let's make it clear, they represent about 30 to 35% of the population at this point. I mean, they're focused on what they felt ignored about. They're focused on how they felt marginalized for a long time. He has, since he's been elected, sort of ramped up the whole idea that any criticism of him is an attempt to marginalize the people who support him. And so that, I think the response is pretty predictable, that, look, I want to be heard, I want to be counted, I want the things that I thought I was going to get out of this presidency, and the enemy is the media for not doing it, or the Republican majority in Congress. You know, the question is at what point those folks start to be disillusioned by the lack of progress, and whether they start to blame the guy who they put their support behind at any point. They seem, I mean, you know, a kind word is delusional about his performance so far, which has been abysmal. But you know, they are very motivated by this sense of marginalization, and I can totally identify.
So
with
do you think that they would ever shift focus when they don't believe anything that they're hearing from the media, Nolan?
Well, I think these are satisfied customers. They are listening directly to the president. I don't think they're paying much attention to what the media says, other than as confirmation that you know, their man is, that the one guy, he wasn't on this tape, but he called it a silent coup, and, you know, against the president, that they're trying to bring the president down. And it seemed to me the more he's under attack, the stronger their support. And I would say, though, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of frustration there, even though, you know, the things that were promised aren't being passed, or, you know, they're not being put in place. They really feel like he's doing what he said he was going to do, and they love the fact that, you know, he's still Donald Trump. He's still, you know, fighting and
I mean, I was curious, and I don't know if you asked any of these folks this. I mean, a couple of the people identify themselves as, you know, diehard Republicans. They don't like the Democrats. But it would be really interesting to ask them what they were saying after 6 months of the Obama administration about respect, about attacks, about the kind of things that they're complaining about in this video, which of course were at a much more fevered pitch and a much less legitimate pitch 8 years ago as they are now. I mean, here you had a president who couldn't say very much without virulent, nasty, personal, racist opposition.
I don't think any group, I think that's more than you'd expect from any group of voters to go back and say, well, they did it to him. You know, they're focused on their guy. I would not even describe these folks that we're talking to as that ardent Republicans. They were Trumpsters. And they were vilifying Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan and others. And I wouldn't say their allegiance was to the party. It's to the president.
Let me ask you this, though. Did you ask any of them about, like, what can the media do to change the perception that everything that we say is untrue, or a blatant attack, or coming from some kind of bias?
No, but, you know, some of them gave some very specific examples of what they thought fake news looked like. And, you know, the one fellow told me that it's not all, when he hears the word, he doesn't assume that it's a made-up story, but it's, you know, all about what stories the media are prioritizing, where they're playing the negative stories versus the positive stories. You know, they were pretty aware that there's an imbalance there, and there's not much focus on what they see as the accomplishments of the administration.
All right, pretty interesting. I think we got to send you out in the field a little more often, Nolan. Maybe on a couple overpasses when it snows. Chicken wings are good. All right. Well, hey, you know, I wanted to fill you in on some news out this week about keeping Asian carp out of the Great Lakes. You know, we cover a lot of Great Lakes issues here at Detroit Public TV out of our Great Lakes Bureau, and for years we've been following potential solutions to keep these fish out of the lakes, because if they do get in, they'll wreak havoc not only environmentally but on the $7 billion Great Lakes fishing industry. But agreeing on how to stop them is not so easy. This week, a new potential solution. Take a look.
The long-awaited Asian carp study has been released this week. It was supposed to be ready in February, reportedly held back by the White House, which wanted to review the plan.
We may have lost that 6 months, but the study is out now.
The Asian carp has been the scourge of the Mississippi River system for years, and the threat to the Great Lakes creeps closer with the discovery of one of these fish just 9 miles from Lake Michigan earlier this summer. Now, the nearly 500-page document details how the Army Corps of Engineers plans to stop the Asian carp from getting into Lake Michigan by way of Chicago.
We still have a lot of analysis left to do on it, but initially it looks pretty promising.
The plan relies on an electric barrier, which is already in place now, but to be supplemented by other deterrent features, including what's being called complex noise and water jets, to be installed at a lock near Peoria that allows barges to pass through.
We're kind of initially encouraged to see was not just using one or two of those technologies, but that the plan that looks like that they're favoring is going to use multiple technologies in concert with each other, where the weaknesses from one can be covered up by the strengths of another.
The study puts the cost for all of this at $275 million.
The Great Lakes sport fishery alone generates $7 billion in economic activity each year. Suddenly, $275 million really doesn't seem like quite that much when you compare it to what's at stake and what could be lost.
The study is now up for review and public comment over the next month and a half.
The support that they've had contacting their congressmen, sharing things on social media, that kind of pressure is what I think led to this report finally being released. However, in order for it to get beyond this stage to actually getting something on the ground, this is going to need funding, and that's going to take continued pressure and continued support and engagement from the public.
All right, and for more of our extensive coverage on Asian carp and all things Great Lakes, just head to MiWeek.org. We'll link you up with Great Lakes Now. Now, finally, if you watch MiWeek enough, you know about the relationship that Nolan, Stephen, and I have, but especially Nolan and Stephen. They disagree a lot, but they're actually very good friends. So in this world of, if you don't agree with me, you're wrong and crazy and I hate you, Nolan and Stephen were on WDET Public Radio this week. I know, still pretty good. They're on radio this week to explore how their upbringing shaped their political and philosophical views and their unlikely friendship. Take a listen.
You and I are able to have this conversation. We're not punching each other.
No.
We're not going to go and smear each other on Facebook tonight or on Twitter, call each other names when we appear on television or radio together. We might disagree bitterly, right?
Oh,
I mean, that doesn't. It never means that we don't get into it.
Little bit.
Yeah, right. I mean, we get after each other.
We like scrapping,
but it's not. It's never. It's never driven by a disrespect,
or a hatred,
and that's a rare space right
but
now, and it's rarer even given our positions, right? I mean, our papers are supposed to hate each other. We're supposed to be on the other, want the other's demise.
We're competitive, and I think you and I are competitive, and the papers are, and they should be. But I would attribute it to, I think both of us feel the same way. I want to read and listen to things I don't learn a thing from people who think exactly like me. Right. And the one thing I'm worried about today, where people sort of group and cluster with like-minded folks.
And that's what I think is really interesting about this larger discussion. Now, what was this project a part of, you guys sitting down and having this conversation?
It was part of the National Story Corps project. They were in Detroit for the month of June, I think it was, at the DIA, and someone called and asked me if I wanted to go tell a story with someone. I said, sure, I'll go and bring Nolan with me. I did.
I think it's really interesting because it brings up the point that we don't even get to know, I think, the people who are speaking, that we're speaking with a lot of times. We don't know their background. We don't understand why they have formed the opinions that they have formed. It feels like that we shut down so much that we only like to hear people that agree with us. And it's getting worse and worse. And both of you mentioned that.
Well, that's a good starting point for any conversation before you start talking about politics, is trying to figure out where the person's coming from, because we automatically assume, as we said there, you don't think like me, well, you're evil, you're stupid, you want to ruin the country, And we had a pretty long conversation during that taping about how our backgrounds shaped our views and how, what's behind our political philosophies, and it's not something we just pulled out of the air. We're a product of a lot of experiences.
Yeah, I have, especially since November, taken to making one of the first questions I ask people when I'm talking to people I don't agree with is, why do you think that? Why do you think you believe the things that you believe, as opposed to just attacking the things that they say they believe and saying why I disagree? I think we've gotten away from that. We've assumed. We now assume that that person thinks that because they're bad or they're evil or they want horrible things to happen, and it's not generally true. Most people want things to go well. They may not see the path there the same way.
Especially now, do you guys find that you talk to people and they say to each one of you, how are you friends with that guy? How are you friends with that guy? But what I'm asking is it's been that way, I'm sure, for a while, but is it worse now? Is there a different, like, oh my gosh, how can you even hang out with that guy?
There's less tolerance now, I think, for people who don't think like you, and I think that spills over into this when they see people who just really don't strike the same position on much of anything, hanging out, having a bourbon, having fun. It takes them back. It's like they saw, a unicorn or something. It's they just can't relate. And I think that's unfortunate, because the problem solving, the policy making process, it starts with people sort of stating their own beliefs and positions, but also being willing to listen to the other side.
Yeah, but compromise has become that big dirty word,
But that's the offshoot of this. If you're not willing to listen to positions you think you don't agree with, or you don't agree with, and really try to understand them, you can't compromise.
Listening is not a weakness. How do we get that point across?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I've noticed people now do when they're debating or having an argument is they're listening for the opportunity to start talking, right? To say, well, here's why you're wrong, as opposed to actually sitting and listening to what the other person's saying and thinking about it. And then trying to formulate what you say in response.
Well, I hate to jump in and be the person who was waiting for the pause, but we've got to go. But this is something I want to keep talking about, and I appreciate the respectful dialogue and the respectful listening that we have on stage. But not always. For heaven's sake, not always. All right. Well, that is going to do it for MiWeek. Find us at MiWeek.org. Thanks so much for supporting Detroit Public TV. I'm Christy McDonald, and for Nolan, Stephen, and the whole crew, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Take care.